welcome you to the TalentGuard webinar. We are excited to talk to you today and have you a part of this learning opportunity. A couple of housekeeping things before we get really into the mix. Please utilize the chat box and the question box to ask any questions that you have throughout the webinar. We'll be happy to answer those towards the end in a Q&A session, but please certainly jot down notes, make them as we go along. We're more than happy to answer them. Today's webinar is on 3 new rules for turning competencies into company results. Certainly a topic that you're hearing a lot about in the literature of talent management, so we're excited to talk more about it today. My name is Chris Wicker, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at TalentGuard.
My name is Paul Foreman. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer here, and let me add my welcome as well. We're going to tell a story today about a fictional company called Green Tech Energy. This is Susan, the CEO. She has 650 employees under her wing, and revenue is growing steadily at 14% year on year. She's increasingly concerned about the competitive environment for talent. So I say fictional, but the issues we'll see today are actual experiences from our clients. I expect you'll recognize some of these symptoms. There's a lot of media, business media coverage right now about the issue of the impact of employee engagement on employee turnover, more critically on the bottom line financial results. Susan has also begun to consider the possible impact of millennials becoming the majority age group in her company, a group that has different expectations of tenure and development needs, and she's getting very concerned about this.
You know, I've seen some of these articles out as well, Paul. Do you happen to have any statistics around some of that data?
We do. Yes, these numbers are scary from a corporate perspective. Training dollars are being wasted because of attrition, up to 85% loss of ROI from talent development. And here's a really dreadful number, 70% of the workforce not being fully engaged. I really think that's a shocking statistic and has to be deeply worrying as we change generations in the workforce. And let's look at the numbers. In Q2, the average revenue per head in oil and gas was $1.8 million in the quarter. I lose that guy, I'm going to feel it. Each vertical has numbers that are at risk if staff are not engaged. If staff are engaged, the upside productivity can be up to 240% increase. It's an astonishing number. And it's math that every organization should do.
It's very, very interesting. So as we all know, CEOs and other executives have their weekly staff meetings or have discussions with their executive team on an ongoing basis. So Susan decided that she was going to raise these challenges to her executive team and get some of their feedback to find out if, in fact, Green Tech had some of these same issues or were seeing some of these same issues throughout their organization. Indeed, there can be a lot of reasons employees are leaving organizations, but what Susan found is that the executives on her team raised some of the same issues that a lack of employee engagement can cause across any organization. I know when I look at it, I get it that low engagement can have high turnover impact, but theft and shrinkage being increased, those were things that I did not think about before prior to this, and I think it's important that you look past some of the turnover things, but that things like absenteeism, safety incidences, overall stagnant revenue per employee, these things can be certainly symptoms of bigger problems throughout organizations.
It's an issue. Susan's CFO came in at the end and said, you know, adding his financial weight to it, said the cost to replace an employee of a $75,000 salary is upwards of $54,000, which sent a shudder through that room. That number came from Drake International. So, like all good executives teams, they passed the project down the line for the real work to happen. And Sarah, the HR director, is tasked with the project.
So Sarah takes this opportunity to jump feet first and first figure out, are these concerns validated within Green Tech? It's important to make sure that this is just not an illusion at the executive level, but they're actually happening and taking their effect throughout the organization before she could ever propose any type of solution. So Sarah took the opportunity to look at all 6 areas of the complete HR cycle. She began with recruiting, followed through to performance, and ended in succession and career pathing. And she feels as though these 6 areas will really help her to validate these concerns.
So she started at the very beginning of the whole process, recruiting. And she looked at her job board, which is available to internal and external seekers, and she found no standard lexicon in the job descriptions. Those job descriptions are also mostly lists of tasks, with little communication on the behaviors required to fulfill and excel at the role. There was plenty of put the customer first, make so many phone calls, get reports in on time, no context for any level or progress within that. She even found 3 job descriptions for essentially the same job, with different wording, different look and feel, just adding to the confusion. Sarah began to think that this very confusion could actually eliminate candidates before they even started to express an interest. Next, she looked at the process from a recruiting manager's perspective. There were no indicators beyond the task-based job descriptions that would help the interviewer observe anything and make judgment on it. By default, therefore, the interviewer would have to be subjective in their impressions. Different managers, different impressions of the same person. Sarah wondered whether all the hiring managers were good interviewers. Struck her that the organization wasn't exactly helping them with this. And Sarah is fully aware that Susan is very concerned about the competitive nature of the talent pool in her industry. So is Green Tech actually putting good candidates off because of this lack of structure?
You know, Paul, I certainly, if I was an employee or an external candidate, would be very confused as to what would be expected of me or what might future be expected of me if I had to look at 3 different job roles or job descriptions for the same job. Next, Sarah went to look at performance. We're seeing this ever-increasing impact across organizations in performance when different organizations within the same firm, different divisions, all utilize different forms, different rating scales, different questions, different performance criteria. How can you ever tie corporate objectives to performance if you have different forms, different coaching methods, different questions being asked? Very difficult to tie that back to corporate objectives. And Sarah found this to be very, very much present in Green Tech, 3 different forms being used across the organization. From a performance standpoint, after performance, you go on to development. And Sarah took a look at development because she knew that once you have a job, most organizations will give you tasks to do. For example, go take this Excel course. All that does is helps you become better at your job. It's very task-oriented versus development to objectives for that employee and competencies for that role that may help them not only perform better in their current job, but prepare them for future opportunities, which we'll talk about in a minute. But one of the areas within development that she found did not exist was tying this content to any type of structured cataloging or categorizing within an LMS. And so utilizing an LMS to serve content up specifically to those employees would make the employee that much more engaged in their own development and a manager that much better at communicating and coaching that talent to the objective goal.
So here's my favorite chart, and it should be very clear to everyone listening what this is. Well, of course it isn't. But this is a career path model from one of our actual customers. And Sarah found the same thing in her organization. Employees didn't have a defined career path that they could understand, they could get their head around, understand the gaps in their development cycle that needed to be filled, understand opportunities, what that were available. Because career pathing is not a ladder. You just don't go straight up. It's a lattice. You have to be prepared to move sideways, to take on different experiences, sometimes maybe down a step to gain that experience and knowledge and progress through the organization that way. So this becomes incredibly complicated, and if it's too complicated, individuals disengage, as Sarah was experiencing, and disengaged sometimes to the extent of leaving because they just don't know where to go next.
I'm confident that there are some individuals maybe on the call today, or you are aware of individuals within the organization that are blue elephants amongst their teams. It's unfortunate that we still have leaders today that put up fences around their teams and prevent high potential employees from looking outside of their teams because they want to keep their teams rocking and rolling. Using a qualified and perfect succession planning methodology, organizations are able to provide that transparency to the senior executive team across the organization. And what Sarah found was that today is not happening. There is no formalized succession planning, so it's happening that organizations are preventing those employees from being found and exposed. So when there are opportunities elsewhere that these high potentials may be able to fit into, they never know, and thus, to Paul's point earlier, they end up leaving and the organization fails in preventing that from happening.
Sarah found that succession planning was corridor talk mostly in her organization, where gaps were identified and people would just ask random questions to see if anyone knew of anyone that might fit it. Clearly that can only be subjective and not a long-term view to actually grow the company in a strategic direction. So Sarah had to summarize the impact, think about what was happening in her organization, and start to begin to think of a proposal of a way out of it, because now she was worried. There was no effective way for professionals in her organization or anyone to navigate that lattice, no way to identify skill gaps, no way to bring people on properly. Relying on managers to develop their career was failing. Finding internal employees to fill roles was failing. It was a major issue. If we take it to the employee, there's no framework on which to base recruiting and developing people. There's no clear articulation of what the job role is. As we said, there were disparate job descriptions, no clear idea of a job profile and where it would lead people. Because of that, it's impossible for a manager to coach effectively, because they could only do back task fulfillment, do more calls, process more invoices. That's not motivating to anyone. And the lack of perceived mobility may be the most fatal fault in what Sarah has found. The millennial generation fully expects to expand and develop their potential as a driver, not a passenger. And the combination of all this leads to the disengagement of staff and all the issues we've highlighted previously, increased sickness, poor productivity, etc. Very few people become vested in results. Some will leave, some will stay. Either way, it's a huge hit to productivity. How many of you know someone who's advanced their career by switching companies? Well, of course we all do. But there are plenty of studies that show the hard cost of replacement, and I'm sure that you, our audience today, has a view to that number and what it means individually to you. But the less obvious costs are contained in the next silos. If the best people are leaving, it's sending a message. And negativity is viral. What's the statistic? People are 17 times more likely to pass on bad feelings or views. Just check Glassdoor. You'll understand that statistic. So good people are going somewhere, and they're increasing the bottom line contribution of their competitors. You can add all of this to the impact on revenue and profitability. By the way, in organizations where people respond as engaged, the earnings per share is 120% of those in the lower quartile. So now Sarah's got a very big picture, if not scary picture, of what the problem is.
Based upon her past, as well as all these findings, Sarah figures out and determines that the only way to fix this problem and help Susan and the executive team address the challenges they're having with engagement is to implement a standard approach, or take a standard approach, with standard measurements and provide that all across the organization. It's critical that Sarah communicate this and put this into the plan so that there are consistent metrics to align human capital. Today, that doesn't happen. We saw the impact on recruitment and the identification of talent, whether internally or externally, is impacted. Certainly, corporate objectives and performance are not aligned. and not tied together. Internal talent, we talked about that, career pathing, succession. They don't have and are unaware of career management opportunities. It's very unfortunate, driving that engagement and mobility down amongst managers and employees. So it's critical that we have consistent metrics in Sarah's new world or in GreenTech's new world. Some might ask, how does Sarah have the credibility to come up with this realization? Well, I'll tell you, she attempted to do this, or she was part of a team at a prior company that tried to implement a competency-based framework, and it was unsuccessful. It was unsuccessful because that organization and that team analyzed individual outputs versus systemic outcomes, really more about efficiency rather than effectiveness.
So they were able to move, for instance, performance management from paper-based to computer-based, but the underlying problem was still there. That performance management review was still done at the 11th hour of the last day before it was due. So nothing had changed, frankly, in the organization in terms of engagement practice.
So this whole experience that Sarah had before, she determined there was one reason why they failed at her prior company, and she refused to have that happen again because it was so important. She knew that if they would have implemented the 3 rules for turning competencies into company results, they would have been in a much better position than they ended up being in. First rule, it's critical that you identify the corporate success indicators. 2, you must establish a competency-based framework that assesses talent against those indicators. And then 3, you got to have a toolkit or provide those tools to the employees and to management that fosters engagement all across the organization.
So let's look at the first one. Clearly, at the top of the organization, the strategy and the market positioning are well known. And in GreenTech's case, the 3 corporate objectives for the year are growth, profitability, and shareholder return. The issue comes in aligning everyone to those goals. In this case, we do it through the performance planning process itself. So those corporate objectives are then attached to individual and departmental objectives in the performance plan, a clear articulation of where talent lies and the competencies that are required exist, which allows thorough coaching and counseling by supervisors in order to finally be able to motivate people in the direction that their career path wants to go. And the outcome of this is organizational agility. We're not talking about a pretty performance plan. We're talking about a genuinely strategically important outcome. Chris, let's talk about what we mean by the career framework.
I think this is something that may be a little unclear to some, but it's actually quite straightforward. We here at TalentGuard have coined the critical part to any career framework is C3, or career core competencies. These competencies are those competencies that the organization feels are most important at the foundation of what everybody does from an employee performance perspective. On top of that, we build job family competencies, or we take job family competencies and build upon C3. These are specific to departments like product, marketing, sales, PR. Paul, why don't you walk us through client focus as an example?
Sure. So, client focus on its own was the type of wording that used to appear in Sarah's job descriptions. Frankly, it's meaningless without context. And where her previous company failed was to deliver the definition and the proficiency scales to it. So we can see the definition they've come up with in the standard as providing service excellence to internal and or external clients. Great. Now we need to look at the proficiency scale, the levels of performance according to that, with different narrative that indicates where people are on that scale. But that's not enough. We also need to look at behavioral indicators that actually respond to and look at the behaviors that each level acts at. So now we begin to see that an entry-level technician maybe has these characteristics that can be seen, observed, measured, and commented against within a performance plan. right up through. So you would expect your entry-level person to be at level 1, and your supervisory level to be at 4 or 5. But critically, you have a path in between and a clear description of what those behaviors look like in order for you to either get there or for your manager to appraise you against those definitions. So as we now bring this back into the framework, we can see that from the C3, from the career core competencies, we develop our job level, our job family competencies according to the division, and then each specific job can be labeled with the competencies required and the level, the proficiency level at which those should be performed. And those job profiles now form the core of managing your workforce throughout the organization.
Wow.
Poor Sarah.
Sarah is in for a bit of work. You think?
It looks like it.
Looks like it is, right? Don't be alarmed. She's not. She can engage TalentGuard as an organization, because here's what we have found and what we have built, that 80% of standard competencies are already built. What do we mean by that? An accountant is an accountant is an accountant. We may have a few modifications based upon the organization, but based upon our experience in the talent management and competency space, we're able to work with you on those. The other 20% that may be specific to green tech case, we pull from a library of competencies where that we then bring a majority of those resources directly into the cloud suite, thus also being able to offer turnkey vertical solutions in certain areas, for example, healthcare, technology, oil and gas, retail. And so for Sarah's purposes on this, we really can have somebody up and running in 4 to 6 weeks on a competency-based framework and start to begin to get a good time to value return on investment.
So now let's look at where we get to. What the tool set that TalentGuard can deliver gives against those 3 rules. Finally, we have a standardized based framework with the same lexicon across all the silos. So right from the beginning in recruiting, the job profiles can clearly articulate not only the tasks, but the behaviors associated with them and what level is required at the role you are applying for, and if you are in that role, where you can move to. It gives managers and hiring managers clear specifications, if you like, of the resource they're trying to recruit and the leveling that's required, so there's clarity there. So now, as the individual joins the organization, there's no shocks, there's no misunderstanding about how they're going to be measured, how the performance management process will work, because they know exactly what the competency expectations that they have, and then they can bring out the conversation about, so if I have gaps, if I'm lacking here, what's next? So the manager can then coach to specific expectations and competencies, and we can grow that conversation into career pathing, because as an individual, I own my destiny. Within this framework from TalentGuard, each individual will own their own career profile. Obviously, it's a discussion with their manager and their supervisor, but they can start to do what-ifs. If I am a junior network technician, and my ultimate goal is to be the director of IT, how do I get there? What flaming hoops do I have to jump through? What competencies do I need to acquire through either experience or qualifications or certification? What sort of tenure in each of those roles do I have to have? This really addresses the millennials' biggest concern. More importantly, it allows the individual and the supervisor to be vested in the future of their organization. And as we move to succession, we get the most exciting part of this. The C-level executives can look into his organization and look at the talent pools, identify where there are gaps, identify ready now candidates, fill the gaps by recruiting or development, bring those candidates into areas where previously they would have been invisible, and finally make a strategic decision about the data that's involved in this process. What's neat about this is that data is consistent all the way through. Everyone's looking at the different cut of the same thing. So predictive analytics actually comes into HR. The datafication of HR allows real transformation of an organization in terms of engagement and retention of their employees.
So a lot of good work Sarah did there. And Susan, being a CEO of the organization, and the rest of the senior executive team couldn't be happier with results that have been received and have been accomplished based upon Sarah's investigative work, as well as finding how to most appropriately implement the 3 rules in competency-based frameworks. And so what Green Tech came to find is that 37% less absenteeism due to more engagement, 22% more profitability, again, due to more engagement, 48% less safety incidences, and 21% more employee productivity. But Susan could be assured when she put her head down on a pillow at night that the corporate objectives that her and her team were developing and rolling out to the organization were being tied to every employee's performance, and everybody knew where they stood and what they needed to do in order for the organization to be successful as a result of their individual roles. Benefits of Sarah: she has helped the employees of the organization understand their career path, including her own, become more engaged in looking at those next steps for her career and what she wants to get out of her development.
So this wheel on the right that you're seeing represents the modular nature of our product suite. We understand that to try and change everything overnight is neither possible nor practical in any environment. So we take a crawl, walk, run approach to this. Whilst it's modular, and you can start with performance management or 360 or development planning, all of these rely on this C3 basis. So you're not going down a path that you can't turn back from by adding a module. Ultimately, they all become unified in the cloud, so there's no risk of dead ends. The core of this is C3 that allows this common language in job profiling and measurement and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your human capital in your organization to exist. And we deliver the product with the SaaS model, which makes it easy to acquire with no IT involvement. So we do this every day. We're talking with clients on a daily basis, understanding the issues that they're facing. And what you've heard today is a representation of the issues that we deal with. We urge you to contact us, develop the conversation for your own organization. Myself and Chris's details are there, and you can call us at 512-943-6800. We'd be very happy to have that conversation and look forward to the opportunity of it.
Great. Well, we did get a few questions as we went through the webinar today. I'm going to take a minute just to let a few more come in here. Please put them in the question window or in the chat, and we'll get them answered. Start off here. First one, Paul, you mentioned 4 to 6 weeks in the webinar, but what are you seeing across the board to launch a competency-based framework regards to time, investment of time, resources? Can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, the easy answer to that is it depends on the commitment. We talked about a 4 to 6 week period in terms of installing some competency framework. But remember, that's just the beginning. In order for this to become systemic, the champions in the organization have to do just that. They have to mentor, they have to show the difference before and afterwards, show the benefits that are very, very real and achieved very, very quickly, and allow their managers, if you like, to lead the charge with their teams.
And I think one thing in doing that, Paul, I'd like to add is when you do it that way as an organization, you put your engagement and a greater adaptability as you're rolling out. So very important. Here's the next question we got. Are there any industries that you see as more applicable for a competency-based framework than others?
You know, I can answer that by saying where we're getting the most requests from. and that's, technology in its broadest sense, retail, where it has terrific applicability on those with multiple branches, healthcare, and oil and gas. You consider the dramatic growth of oil and gas recently means that they're having to get their hands around the talent pools they have, and that is a highly competitive area. But I was also recently had several conversations with transportation companies, again, because of their geographically dispersed nature.
Great. Here's one last one. I really like this one, and I think you guys will be very interested to hear the answer to it. But management company, what hot topics are you seeing in the market? Paul, I think you and I would agree. Succession and career pathing are probably the two hottest topics that we talk about on a daily basis. We get questions on how organizations are planning for the future, how they're allowing their employees and providing a tool to give them more career pathing opportunities in that or the mobility within the organization, really truly bringing a great financial impact to the organization. And heck, we saw that with Sarah.
That's right. We previously had a webinar on the impact of millennials, but this ability to own your own career path is not a nice to have, it's a must have for the generation coming through. As I said earlier in the presentation, they absolutely need to be drivers, not passengers in this process. So visibility to what's available is what retains them. We know the statistic, they're going to have 17 to 20 roles in their lifetime. That's an astonishing number of jobs. If you take it from a sales perspective, and you think of time to productivity by bringing a new salesperson on, and they're a millennial, and they're going to leave in 2.5 years, that means you only get a year's productivity, really, full productivity out of that salesperson. That's a real problem because you lose momentum every time you lose one. So giving them access to where they can go, making them feel an owner of the process is critical, and that's what this tool allows you to do.
So we got two last ones that popped in here, and so I think it's worth taking a few minutes to answer them because I think they're probably on the minds of some. So can you explain how the 5-level proficiency scale relates to performance rating? Additionally, for an employee where the expectation is to demonstrate at the level 5 proficiency, can they be an exceeds expectation performer?
So the proficiency level describes behaviors to a certain competency. What you would do is fit that in with whatever standard performance scale you have. So if you have a doesn't meet, meets, exceeds, always exceeds, level 5, that would be attached to level 5 requirements of the role. So if you are a supervisor, you are expected to perform at a level 5, for instance, of customer focus. You apply your performance rating against the actual performance from the observable behaviors that are described in that competency framework. So you might be required to perform at level 5, and you can meet or exceed expectations, or you can be subpar. Say, hey, you're supposed to be at level 5, you're only performing at level 4, let's have a conversation.
Absolutely. Another question that came in, and this is the last one I think we'll do for the day, but another question I had was around tracking and capturing technical competencies. Do you track technical requirements within the tool or functional competencies that describe functional behaviors? Effective analytical skills as an example. But where would you track the need for SSRS coding skill or PMI certification requirement for a role? I think I would answer that, and I think I understand the question. I would say that your functional competencies, or your functional competencies is really what we kind of were talking about today, would be tracked within the cloud suite as you're moving along, as you're evaluating that employee from a performance standpoint, as they are senior management are looking at it from a succession planning, a technical future opportunity requirement standpoint, and then when you look at certifications, PMI, the coding type of things, if you recall, one of the things Sarah found and looked at was in that development path of being able to serve up content around material that tied back to those behavioral competencies. Those certifications that you mentioned in your question, PMI, the coding, those would be things that an organization could serve up through the LMS in the cloud suite to accomplish and track those things.
Chris, let me add to that. Within the individual job roles that we create, you can say that to be a level 5, you require this level of certification. So that gives a path upwards, if you like, or across. If you are currently a level 3, and you go to your boss and you say, hey, how do I get to level 5? And they can say, well, you're performing against these competencies really well, but there is a requirement for this certification or this qualification or this class to be done. So you can actually attach those requirements to the job profile, either recruit to it, develop to it, but it's explicit within the framework about what the requirements are.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our webinar today. Really have had a great time talking to you about some of our experiences and what we're seeing in the marketplace. We would love to talk with you if you see some of the things in your organization that we talked about today with Green Tech. We would love to have a conversation with you on that. If you have any questions after you hang up today, please feel free to reach out to Paul or myself. We will be sending out an email with the downloadable slides as well as the recorded webinar for your viewing pleasure and activities. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Have a great day, guys.